Good morning, you're watching Sky News Breakfast. In a moment, we'll discuss the papers with political editor at the HuffPost, Kevin Schofield, and the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. But first, let's just take a look at today's front pages. The FT leads with the war in Gaza, suggesting Israel may be planning for a year-long offensive. The Guardian says Israel will be escalating the war with a ground attack in the south of Gaza after the truce was suspended. In the Mail, a report that thousands of children will be skipping school to go on protests in support of Palestine. The Times predicts Boris Johnson will be apologising next week when he gives evidence to the COVID inquiry. Don't believe doubters, says the Daily Express, as senior officials insist the government's Rwanda deal is still on, despite a number of legal challenges. The Telegraph leads on the royal book row as pressure mounts on Prince Harry to speak out on the issue. And the book Endgame is the headline for The Sun as it claims the royals face a split beyond repair. And Kevin and Dawn are here with us throughout the morning to look at today's papers. Great to see you both. Let's kick off with the front page of the FT weekend.
Yeah.
Because that is a really eye-catching headline, Kevin, that this could potentially be a year-long offensive in Gaza.
Yeah, it says it could go on until late 2024. Obviously, we had the fragile ceasefire ended a couple of days ago. And I think we had hope because the initial pause had been extended 2 or 3 times, and it looked as though perhaps the conflict was perhaps starting to die down a little bit, but now it's come back literally all guns blazing.
Yeah.
What the FT are saying is that it's a 3-pronged strategy that the Israelis are going to pursue. They are currently garrisoned in the north of Gaza, but they want to go deep into the south of Gaza, which you've got to imagine in terms of innocent civilians. Obviously, they were initially told move from the north into the south. Where do they go now if the war is going to continue into the south? And yeah, potentially it says, there are various sort of moving parts to this. A lot of it depends on international pressure, obviously, which is, I mean, I think if America, for instance, were to turn around and say, right, enough's enough, there's too many innocent civilians being killed, I think the pressure then on Israel to back off would be quite intense. But so long as there are hostages certainly being held still in Gaza, this will continue. And the ultimate aim of Israel is to end Hamas. But how you do that is a big question.
I mean, even from the very beginning, it felt like a rather unrealistic objective. And certainly, Dawn, the front page of The Guardian is saying that the offensive is now moving to the south of Gaza, and there's just so much concern because it seems that there's no safe humanitarian zone there now. So
there isn't.
What next?
The original advice was to move to the south of the country, so that's where you would be safe, and they're clearly not safe. They can't cross over into Egypt because only a few people have been allowed to go through the Rafah crossing so far, haven't they? And America have warned overnight that they have said, to Israel, it's like, you can't bombard southern Gaza like you have northern Gaza, because that is where, over 1 million people are still. I mean, there's still plenty up in northern Gaza, we know, and that is where people are gathering. So what are they going to do? I mean, from a military point of view, I mean, listening to someone talking about a military expert overnight, and he was saying that it has to be, if they're going to go into southern Gaza, it has to be the infantry rather than the Air Force, because the Air Force is just obliterating everything and bombing everything. So if they want to tackle any terrorists potentially in southern Gaza, they have to send the infantry in, so it's like on the ground fighting rather than sort of like literally carpet bombing the area and killing lots more innocent civilians. But this is the most pressing headline of the day. It's the one you really don't want to read, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, Kevin, before we move on to other stories, it's hard to see what will be left of Gaza if this offensive does last an entire year. Do you think before long we will see a change in diplomatic messaging from the likes of the US when it comes to what's happening?
I think it's inevitable. I think you've already seen early signs of the US starting to not withdraw support from Israel, but changing their messaging that, while they obviously support Israel's right to defend itself, at the same time, there is a humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza, and once the war ends, as you say, there will have to be a reconstruction
How can
of
it
the
end?
entire.
How can it end? Because you've got two
area.
sides who have sworn to wipe each other out.
Well, that's it. But I mean, it can't go on forever, indefinitely. Well, certainly at this intensity. But yeah, I think America are key to this. You know, as always, they will be the ones who will ultimately not decide whether it ends, but they will certainly influence heavily Israel's strategy and how they go about it. And obviously, then you've got, if it's a year long, into the end of 2024, you don't want to reduce it to a British domestic issue. But then you're rubbing up against the UK election here, obviously the issues we've had with the Labour Party, huge splits in Labour. They don't want to be going into a general election with this still going on.
You know?
So, you know, there's many factors at play.
Yes, certainly there are widespread implications politically, because this is a story that a lot of people care about, as we see with the weekly
Enormously.
marches in cities around the UK. And another issue that I'm sure will be discussed come the next election, Dawn, is featuring on the front page of today's Daily Express. Don't believe the doubters. This Rwanda migrant plan could still be on.
This is probably going to go on longer than the conflict between Palestine and Israel, which I think is about 3,000 years has been going on in total. Rwanda feels like it's going on just as long. This is an interview with Yolande Makola, who is a regime spokesman for Rwanda, and she is saying that basically we are a safe country. If you do send migrants to us, we won't send them back to their country of origin. We are a very safe country, and the deal that Rishi Sunak struck with us is a good one, and we will abide by it. Because obviously last month the Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in case they were removed to the country of origin, and that was the danger there. Rishi Sunak is now drawing up a new agreement, new legal terms, to say, no, it's legally binding that they can't, any migrants we send them cannot be moved on, and this seems to be backing that deal up, because there was talk about the whole deal being off the table because of this, but Rwanda saying, no, we're a very safe country, and there was also a picture there of Rishi Sunak meeting with Paul Kagame, who is the head of Rwanda, and they are sort of like seeming to sort of like hammer out the final details as well. But evidently it is safe because the British government say so.
Quick look at the front page of the Times before we move on for this hour, Kevin. We could get an apology from Boris Johnson, it seems, next week at the COVID inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is quite smart from Boris Johnson. Clearly, thus far in the inquiry, he's come in for an awful lot of criticism. The whole Downing Street operation, it would appear, seemed incredibly chaotic. We kind of knew that at the time as well.
Tell us something we don't know.
So I guess it's quite smart politics for him to say, right, hands up, I'll apologise, you know, we didn't get everything right, and no one's suggesting that they could possibly ever have got everything right. That being said, I don't think that will get him terribly far. You know, he's going to be, I imagine he's going to defend a lot of what they did. He will say that they saved tens of thousands of lives, potentially hundreds of thousands of lives by pushing ahead with the vaccine programme so quickly. But I think he's going to have a real difficulty in trying to convince the inquiry that, you know, he did not make enormous mistakes, and that the culture within Number 10, well, he was there, he was the man at the top, and the culture comes from the top, that he doesn't carry a huge amount of blame for the way it turned out. But also, interestingly, he is going to defend Rishi Sunak, maybe surprisingly, over Eat Out to Help Out. Now, we've already heard Chris Whitty, Patrick Vallance say, we didn't know anything about this, and if we'd known about it in advance, we'd have said, no way. But he's going to say that they did know about it, so that's going to be a bit of a...
You know, I always got the impression from day one with this that the politicians will end up blaming the scientists, and the scientists will end up blaming the politicians. And all I heard from this yesterday was 6 hours of Matt Hancock saying, I don't like Dominic Cummings. That was it. 6 hours of them two fighting like kids in a school playground.
Yeah, certainly. If you thought this week was box office, then let's wait for next week.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. Kevin, Dawn, see you next hour. Thanks so much.